Why not?
Hold on to your seats, everyone. It's the episode you've all been waiting for. The Star Wars Newsnet Year in Review for Star Wars, focusing entirely on Star Wars publishing. Yes, because last week, Miguel and I go through just the little things like TV shows and movie news. This is where the real discussion happens. We're talking about the comics. We're talking about the books. This is where we find out just how deep you are in all of this nonsense that we call Star Wars. And so, of course, we have, the three members, like the triumvirate of the Star Wars Newsnet, like books and comics. We have the three minds assembled. And I think between the three of us, we should have like everything covered, or at least really close to it. Because I know that there's some books that you guys haven't read, or some comics that you haven't read that I have, and the same goes for all of you. Like I know Nate is and Luke, you guys have read way more comics this year than I've read, like comics too. So we're gonna have some fun. We have all of this. Are we ready? We're gonna start with the books. So here we go. I'm going to run down every single novel that came out this year. We're not doing like the essential legends novels, things like that. And if we miss one in the comments, let us know which one we missed. There are so many Star Wars publishing, things that come out every year that Nate is always having to constantly update his own like notes, I'm sure, because he's the guy that leads everything for Star Wars Newsnet for books and comics. And I'm sure that's no easy task to keep track of all of the books and comics that are coming out. So here we go. The novels of the year. We started off the year. We have Escape from Valo. If you're a High Republic fan, this was the like young reader book right here. And then we jumped into the Defy the Storm novel, which was the young adult novel from Tessa Gratton that took place. I think that came out in like February, followed by Tales of Enlightenment, which was just a collection of just some short stories that happened. The Bar Enlightenment, if you are familiar with phase 2 of the High Republic. So that was a good one. Then we had the long-awaited Living Force, the George Jackson Miller novel that came out in April, I believe, following our prequel era Jedi Council members, which I am excited to hear some more thoughts about that as we review that. Followed by my favorite book of the year, which was Temptation of the Force by Tessa Gratton. It was like my Star Wars highlight of the year was being able to talk with Tessa Gratton about this book in an interview we did for the site. Make sure you go check that out if you missed it. So back in June. This is my favorite novel of the year. I can't wait to talk more about it. And then we got the Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire from... I'm blanking on some of the author names.
Stephen Kempshaw?
Yes.
No, Chris Kempshaw.
Chris yes, Kempshaw. There we go. And this was an interesting...
Chris Kempshaw.
Yes, this was an interesting book as well, kind of chronicling, how the Republic or the Empire rose and fell from the perspective of a Star Wars historian, which I thought was very interesting. And we have Beware the Nameless, another young reader book that came out, followed by Tears of the Nameless, because George Mann has been cooking in the High Republic era. And then we had the Mace Windu book, The Glass Abyss, that came out around the same time. We had Seeds of Starlight, another little short story there. And then the audio drama to end the year with Tempest Breaker. That's everything. That is our novels for this year. We did it. And I think looking through that, I know that most of us have plowed through almost all of those. So that is exciting. So I will start it off. Nate, I'll let you have the first go here. What was your high of the year in Star Wars novels? Like what was your favorite novel? What was your favorite thing that came out for this year, 2024 Star Wars novels?
If I had to pick a high that wasn't your guys', because I know at least one of you will go with Temptation of the Force. Because that was probably my favorite book of the year too.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you can just say that too. That's fair.
No, I want to be different. I want to be different. But I'm not going to go too far out of the realm of that.
He says Tales of Enlightenment.
No. I want to say Living Force because I loved the book beginning to end. And I was talking with John Jackson Miller this year about that book, and also seeing him up Cities Con a few back. That was fun. And I'm here in Minneapolis.
Nate, I'm gonna boot you real fast and then bring you back in just because we're having some internet connection. Okay, so just go ahead and leave and then like rejoin, and we'll be just fine.
I can't say. I have also read The Living Force. I think it is worthy of being someone's favorite book of the year. That was a really good one. I'm really glad Nate's here because he did the interview with John Jackson Miller. So I would love to hear when he comes back.
I ran through it.
Yeah, John Jackson Miller has done quite a bit for Star Wars too. He wrote an Obi-Wan novel that is Legends right now, but he's done a lot of good stuff. So.
So Nate, I think you're back. We're joining back. So give us briefly there. You were getting on the Living Force.
Yeah, Living Force, one of my favorite novels of the year. But in terms of just overall reading experience, I think my favorite book of the year has to be Tears of the Nameless. For those of us who have been ingrained in the High Republic, we have been waiting for something in terms of answers, in terms of towards the High Republic end game. Get just this epic odyssey with Wreath, Amadeus, Rel, all kinds of great villains and great subplots and all this great stuff in Tears of the Nameless. That was just a wonderful book that I still cannot believe I read in all of about 2 days and was able to still review it for the site. That was a long weekend.
It was incredible. it was incredible. I remember you got that, you just plowed through it, you put out the review. But honestly, the High Republic, I felt like the High Republic started off. Escape from Valo was an excellent novel for, I thought it packed a lot more punch than I was expecting for the young reader books typically do. And so I really made my way through that and was really excited. Defy the Storm was not as good as I was hoping it would be as a Vernestra Rowe centric novel. It was not what I was like hoping for. It was a little slow. The pacing struggled at times. I think it was a little too long for what the story it was trying to tell. So I felt like the High Republic got off to a slow-ish start in 24, just because the first book we got was the young reader book, which are fun, but those aren't the meat and potatoes that we really want. And then the first young adult novel was not necessarily up to the expectations that I usually have for these High Republic books. But then once we hit the summer and we get Temptation of the Force, and then the fall when we get Tears of the Nameless, like those two books are top tier, like in the top list of High Republic books out there. So I thought that in terms of closing out the second half of the year, oh my goodness, I feel like we're on a High Republic high going into next year where we're going to finish this whole thing off. But Luke, so we have Living Force from Nate, but then, Tears of the Nameless really was the one that stuck out with him. Which one for you was your Star Wars high of the year for these novels?
And I will say, Escape from Valo, I think, was my favorite middle grade novel of the year. I really, honestly, I put that as like charming. My favorite middle grade novel out of all of the High Republic. That one really impressed me. I really liked Ram leading the three kids. Really like that middle grade novel. There will be a little bit of repeat here, but I think my favorite novel of the year that came out this year was Temptation of the Force. Tyler, I know you did that interview. I would love for you to go on that spiel. I really liked The Living Force. It had the feel of Legends, where it's kind of just doesn't take itself too seriously. It's not hyper connected to any other story. The villain was all brand new villain, Silastra.
Great villain.
I really liked how creatively John Jackson Miller had that story. I really liked that. And my takes on Beware the Nameless, Tears of the Nameless, those were good. There that kind of like take place in the same exact like
Yep.
span of time for the timeline of Star
Mhm.
Wars. So it's kind of fun to read those. They came out in back-to-back months. Man, did I really enjoy Tears of the Nameless, because Nate, you hit on it. Like, we are looking for answers basically since the Rising Storm. We like find out that these nameless exist, and we're like, as readers, we're like, what is that? What is going on? How did that just calcify a person? What are you talking about, Kevin Scott? What do you mean? So to finally get like real heading and real direction of like, okay, Comac knows this and Reith knows this, and they put their answers together, and we're getting places here, and the
All while
epic, like,
terrified that one of them was gonna get offed by by one of the nameless at the end
Oh
of
my
that book,
God.
and I was
yeah,
I was terrified that we were gonna lose, Amadeus
one,
Master, and then we
yeah,
were gonna lose, one of Colmac or Reith in that book as well. Like I was really nervous about that, which just means that I'm gonna be doubly terrified when that book comes out, next year. Into the Light comes out next year, because
whew,
that's gonna be their kind of culmination arc. So
yes, yeah,
I have to say, Temptation of the Force is far and away my favorite novel of the year. It's really not even close for me. And I loved Tears of the Nameless. I really did. But Temptation of the Force had every single thing I love in Star Wars. It had the gripping, just heart of the High Republic to me is Avar and Elzar. And like their relationship, those are my two favorite, mainline, adults like Jedi's we're making through. Like that's my favorite relationship of the High Republic, and watching them kind of have their hot and cold like throughout this whole thing has been interesting. But to finally have them together again and expressing this book, they express their feelings for one another, they talk about it, they admit that they love each other, and we have this whole two Jedi that are essentially in a relationship, loving each other, and that's essentially accepted by Yoda, because Elzar tells Yoda about, Avar told me that she loves me and I love her, and Yoda basically saying, we're supposed to love, then talking about the differences in what, love is versus like, you know, what we see from Anakin, and how he kind of his love is warped in a way into his own insecurities, but with Elzar and Avar it strengthens them. And to get that story while it's just this action packed, never stops chapter. Like I never once finished a chapter and was like, all right, this is a good place to stop. No, I had to immediately try to get on with the next one, because if I wasn't in an Avar Elzar chapter, I knew the next one might be another Avar Elzar chapter. I had to get there. Not to mention you have Porter Ingle
I was
going
gonna say Porter
against,
Ingle.
his nemesis, and the backstory going on there. You still had our first novel. Think about this. How many times Burryaga has been in the High Republic? Has been quite a bit, but we've never had a novel where it was from Burry's point of view. It was usually from Belle's point of view when we discuss the two of them. But this novel flipped it, and I loved hearing Tessa Gratton say she wanted to be able to write this novel that said, no, we're gonna have Burry kind of tell the version of the story, instead of like we're gonna see Burry through Belle's eyes. We're actually gonna see Belle through Burry's eyes this time. And I actually thought that was a wonderful way to make me more connected with Burryaga as a character, because when he died, or quote unquote died in, Fallen Star, I was very sad, but I wasn't so broken up because we really haven't heard, specifically from him. And so this book really did that. And so obviously Marky and Row, everything about this book was just what I want from Star Wars. It is pure Star Wars fun. It had me terrified the entire time that we were going to have one of these characters ripped apart from one another. And it expands the lore of the Force if you get into the end of this book and you just read how they combat the Nameless at the end, and they kind of pool their using Avar's Force powers and Burry's empathy. They like pull together to combat the Nameless. It's just incredible what this book was able to do. So I thought this was my favorite, Star Wars book of the year. Temptation of the Force is maybe my favorite High Republic novel. It's got to be close. I'm rereading them all right now, so that's been fun. But the Temptation of the Force is good. I have not read Living Force, so I would love to hear more from you, Luke, on in you guys from what specifically about the Living Force, because my question, and I think some people that haven't read it, what they have heard is that Living Force is very much a slow burn of a book where it doesn't necessarily have the high highs that you typically get from a Star Wars book, but it just kind of has like a nice, just solid, road to the finish line that feels worthy of the length of the book that it is.
Yeah. It's the fact that like it took a couple chapters to really, for me to understand like how the villain is being set up and how they're even working and their machinations. So in the first couple chapters, I'm like, why did they steal that? What does that even mean? And you get to like the middle of the book and you're like, oh, so that's why they're stealing briefcases. Like it's like it is a really slow burn and it takes a while to get the whole thing set up, but it's very rewarding when you get to 2/3 of the way in, halfway in, and you're like, oh wow, I see what he's been doing this whole novel. I can see where this is going. Oh my gosh, I got to find out how this happens. And also, there's that. But I really love getting points of view from someone like Adi Gallia or all these characters that are just on screen that are just kind of Ki-Adi-Mundi and Yariel Poof and Eth Koth. There's this wide array of characters that you are getting points of view from and you're hearing from. So it was very enjoyable to actually have characterization to these people that were just background characters in the Phantom Menace. That's really what it is. It's kind of a love letter to the Phantom Menace. It takes place a year before that movie. So that is what I really loved. There's a lot of characters.
Is there a book, like if you had to look through the list of novels this year, is there any that you haven't gotten to yet that you are most looking forward to? Or is there one on the list that is you just can't wait to read that one again at some point? Like you're like, this is probably the first one I want to reread.
Nate?
Like out of the books from this year?
Yeah, just from the books from this year.
I probably look forward to most reading Temptation of the Force. But going off of what Luke was saying about the Living Force, my favorite part of that book and which would make it worth a reread is just how much of a slice of life the book is. It's spending time with these characters, interacting with the community and the planet of Quen that they're on, that they have a very tight connection with, dating back to the High Republic era. In a way, the Living Force is very much a High Republic book, in that it's forcing the Jedi Council to remember a time when they actually, I don't want to say cared about the galaxy, but that's basically what Qui-Gon's challenge at the beginning of the book is to remember what's the point of being a Jedi. It's not, we see in Adi Gallia doing secretary work for Chancellor Palpatine, and that peeves Qui-Gon off to no end. So he just is, I love every character in the Living Force is worth spending time with. Ki-Adi-Mundi is great. Let's see, trying to remember his name.
Yariel, he's great. Plo Koon and his ring buddy in the book. Yeah, Stacey Tin. So John and John Jackson Miller, he basically pairs all the Jedi off, and that's how he's able to get through a lot of the chunky bits of the book, because 12 POVs is a lot. So he narrows it down to make it easier to read. But yeah, just living the world of the Living Force was a joy. So I would be excited to go back and reread that book. It is slower, but I think because of the nature of the book, it has to be slow. You have to live in this world to really understand the point of what John Jackson Miller is trying to get across. So I don't mind slow books because if it's purposeful, you know,
Yep.
if it doesn't feel like the author is just stretching this out because they're not sure what direction they want the story to go in. But from everything I've heard from you guys or other people that, you know, enjoy Star Wars books that I respect, is that it's very purposeful. Like, we're going to spend time with these characters because we don't have a lot of time with some of these characters. And we're going to get to know like the intricacies of their relationships and personalities. And I love the comments that you've made about reminding us, the reader, too, of what it is like to be a Jedi. What are the Jedi supposed to be, like, ideally? And so, Luke, which book here have you not gotten into that you most want to get into, and like, what are you most looking forward to rereading in the future?
Very strongly, I am looking forward to getting to The Glass Abyss. I really haven't heard a ton of stuff about it, so I don't feel like I know what happens. I like Mace Windu. He's actually a pretty cool character in the Living Force. He's got a cool arc there, him with Depa Billaba. So I know that this book kind of is like, I read like the overview inside the book. It's like the Qui-Gon gives a last little command before he dies. So Mace is trying to fulfill that, and I'd love to read this. I think Mace Windu is a pretty cool character. I think he kind of gets maybe some bad press from Revenge of the Sith sometimes, but I would love to see a book that really shows him as a hero. So I'm really excited to get to this whenever I can. It will probably be next year. Probably not going to fit it in the rest of 2024, but I would love to get to that. As far as this year, what I'd love to reread, I would love to reread Defy the Storm. I don't know if maybe because Tyler, I know you said it wasn't the best book. You kind of were hoping it was better. So maybe I'm thinking, since I kind of agree with that sentiment, I want to reread it. I want to give it another shot. I want to see how much I like it upon a reread when I know what comes after and I kind of know what it's trying to set up. I think maybe I'll like it better.
Probably you will. I think so my problem with that book, even looking back now, is Tears of the Nameless is all the payoff that you want from Defy the Storm. The problem for me is Defy the Storm is unjustifiably long. Like, it doesn't need to be as long as it is in order to still do exactly what it needs to do. And so there's probably about 120 pages of that book that I feel like we could kind of condense down and give like a better story that makes the pacing feel a little bit more, because it can be a bit of a slog fest getting through that one at times. But Tears of the Nameless definitely helps paint a better picture of that book too, because it gives all the payoff that you're hoping for. I was hoping it would pack a little more punch, but it's okay. For me, I will say that the one I most want to reread is definitely definitely want to read is Temptation of the Force again. Like, that's the one that I'm most looking forward to rereading again. But The Living Force, I haven't read it. That's the one I'm probably looking forward to most. I have it sitting over there. I've been meaning to do it for a while. It just has not gotten done yet. So I'm going to make that a priority over this winter break from school, I think, is to get that one done. I like what you said about Glass Abyss. I feel like Glass Abyss came and went, and
that's very much how the publisher treated it too.
it just exists, and
there were no excerpts for anything, or very little marketing.
And it's Mace Windu too, who's one of the most recognizable, popular Jedi that we have. Poor neighbor, just keep having the connection issues today, but it's gonna be okay. So poor Mace Windu. I was gonna say poor Mace Windu. Like, we're talking about one of the most recognizable Jedi in all of Star Wars. I thought for really a standalone Mace Windu novel, they might have given a little bit more platform, a little bit more spotlight on it, but them not doing that was a little bit interesting. I only have one bone to pick in this entire list, and Luke, can you guess what my bone to pick is with the novels / text that we have here?
I'm not exactly sure.
I'm gonna put this bad baby up here.
Oh, we have not talked about that at all.
Tempest Breaker. I have not read or listened to Tempest Breaker yet.
Neither
So
have I.
this has nothing to do with the quality of the story, which from what I've heard is just kind of
I have both
and
pick with its quality.
okay. So Nate will have the bone to pick with this quality. My problem is the era. This is just the world of like comic publishing and comics in general. When we're wrapping up the main line, we're gonna get into the main line like Marvel High Republic run, and we're on issue 8, and then they announced Tempest Breaker, and they put like every single character in the story that's from the comics. They're gonna be here, but issue 8 basically ends with this cliffhanger of, are these characters going to make it? Which ones? And you're expecting some of them not to make it because it's the High Republic, and then oh no, they're all just right here, and then the mainline run kind of just ended very meh. It kind of made me. It was like, all right, but I was excited because I'm like, okay, I have Tempest Breaker coming up. But my bone to pick is it felt like I never got any interesting payoff for the Marvel run that I was hoping for. And there's some really interesting characters that are in that Marvel run that I like Keith Trennis, Tay Sarek, and it just never felt, Skier. There's never felt like we got the Lorna D, the payoff that we were hoping for in some of these. But you know what? The 2025 will deliver that to us. 2025 will deliver that to us. But I need to give Tempest Breaker a read/listen to before I judge too thoroughly. Any other final thoughts on any of the books this year before we get into the comics? We're good?
I think we're good. I think it was a pretty good year of publishing.
Yeah, not really.
I will say Tales of Enlightenment, low key, actually. It's just a fun little read. If you're really deep in the High Republic, it's worth checking out. All
I
right.
think I had a better time with that than Starlight Stories.
For those that are listening, why don't we run out exactly what is like that would be confusing. Basically what that is it's a collection of the Star Wars Insider short stories, and they just republished those together. So
yes,
they did it for phase. They'll probably do it for phase 3 as well. So
yes, they will. So here we go. If we leave off any of the comics, let me know. We don't have some of the issues in there. We stuck with mainly just like the mainline runs or short runs that they did and some of the one shots. But here we go. We have the Mandalorian Season 2 adaptation concluded this year. The Obi-Wan Kenobi series adaptation concluded this year. The Bounty Hunters run concluded this year. The Star Wars mainline concluded at issue number 50, taking place in between episodes 5 and 6, I believe. Correct? Am I correct? Yes, episodes 5 and 6. And then Shadows of Starlight 4. We have the main Shadows of Starlight run that ended. It's just a short series there. The High Republic mainline concluded from Marvel. And we also had Dr. Aphra concluding. There was a Mace Windu run this year. Obviously, there were several High Republic Adventures branch-offs, with the main High Republic Adventures series was going on. We have plenty of hyperspace stories comics to choose from this year as well. We have the Thrawn Alliances adaptations here. We also had the Jango Fett run, which might be the surprise enjoyable comic of the year for me, just in terms of low expectations, but really, excited about that overall. We had the Saber for Hire. We had Darth Maul, Black, White, and Red. We had as Luke told me before, the underwhelming Inquisitors comics. And of course, the big one of the year, which was the Ewoks comic run. The Ahsoka series adaptation concluded. We had the Acolyte Kelnaka one-shot comic. We had Echoes of Fear that made its way through. We had, of course, the Battle of Jakku, which decided we are going to pack as many punches and drop the hammer as many times as possible on you in these few comics. And we also had dispatches from the Occlusion Zone. And I believe I got everything. I probably missed something. We probably missed something in this whole world of comics and graphic novels and things like that. But if so, just let us know in the comments. I'm sure there's some missing, but I think that's enough for us to go on for right now. So what was the high of the year for you all in the comic world? Go ahead, Luke. You have the first one this time. You'll take the first one. Nate went first for books. You go first for comics.
All right, this feels like a cheap shot. I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it. Star Wars mainline issue 50.
Yeah.
Charles Soule did this whole run. I really enjoyed what he did over this course of 4 years. And it was in this year of 2024 that we got 9 issues. So back in September, I believe, close to September is when that 50th issue came out. And that 50th
Mhm.
issue, really, the run ended in issue 49. It's kind of like the conclusion of that comic run. Then we have issue 50, which is kind of Charles Soule saying, hey, thanks for sticking with us. Issue 50 is going to be a special one. It's not going to be connected to the previous run that concluded. So here is a Luke and Ben story. And they go essentially meet up with the remnant of Aslan Rel. And, as we know, Charles Soule is a High Republic architect. So he, of course, knows who Aslan Rel is. He's written him. Well, he's helped design the character. So it was just a really interesting, really cool payoff for people who are just really deep into Star Wars. If you have been really deep into Star Wars, you're probably paying attention to High Republic stuff. You're paying attention to the comics. So I feel like Charles Soule did a really cool job making this really interesting story about how he's using Luke to tell Ben about the stories of that core group of Luke, Leia, Lando, Chewie. Like they're just trying to save people. They're trying to figure out, do I use this ultimate power to hurt people like the Emperor? Maybe I can just hurt the right people. No, that's not the idea. Let's save people. Like it was this really cool lesson that he teaches Ben, that I would like to think sticks in Ben's mind and maybe helps him turn in episode 9. So
who would
I
have
really
thought
like
that Aslan Rel
I
would
think
just have this massive role, and throughout all eras of Star Wars, he's this major figure in the High Republic that I was not even expecting to become a major figure here as we enter Phase 3, and then we
He's
have
the
him
key.
popping up now. he is the straw stirring the Star Wars publishing drink as he is right now. So I thought, yes, that's a good one. That's a good one, Luke. Nate, your Star Wars comic high of the year.
So I noticed it wasn't in the rundown there, but my high of the year is actually the flip side of Star Wars 50. It's Darth
Ooh.
Vader 50.
I said Darth Vader. Yeah, the Darth Vader concludes.
Oh, you did?
Oh, okay, there we go.
Yeah, I didn't.
I missed it as well.
I forgot if we had or not. But where Star Wars 50 was just this spiritual wrap up, kind of just conclusion to whatever Charles Soule telling the story he really wants to tell. Darth Vader 50 focused more on wrapping up its particular story. Greg Pak's Darth Vader run was very up and down throughout its 50 issues. But that final arc of that series was so rewarding for so many different ways. Basically, if you haven't read the final arc of Darth Vader, post Dark Droids last year, Darth Vader and the Emperor are still very much at odds, but then there's others of the Empire that are also not super thrilled with the Emperor's rule. So they create this little sub-faction called the Schism Imperial. They rope Darth Vader into that, and it all branches out but all throughout this, Darth Vader, he's going through this mental strife and just trying to really figure out what his life has become. And that very much ties back into Luke. Sai, she comes back into the fold, and it's just this lovely wrap up to the Darth Vader character. And in number 50, they really hit home on the idea of Padme's last words. There's still good in him. And we see that through the eyes of Sabe. And the final issues of the series, Sabe, she meets Luke, she meets Leia, she sees some of Darth Vader's final acts. It's like, so we really get this grand payoff to this character. And I really appreciated that last element of the series, and it still left you wondering. I mean, we all know he's gonna redeem himself, but they still wrapped the series up in a way that still left it ambiguous, and it's still when you rewatch Return of the Jedi, you're like, that high of him redeeming himself is still the series just wrapped up in such a fulfilling way. So Darth Vader for me was the best comic of the year for me, because I just loved it. Man, it was so good.
So we have the main Star Wars run, Darth Vader, but we're all forgetting the greatest thing that happened in Star Wars comics this year, the Lula Zine wedding one-shot, which is the best, most wonderful love story in Star Wars. We get, I talked about Elzar and Avar this year. I was just a sucker for the romance in Star Wars this year. We got Lula and Zine, just they have survived. They're making their way through this horrific time enough to come together in holy matrimony. And this happened all while at the same time we were getting one of the other great arcs of our time, which is the Ewoks arc as well. So there are those two incredible stories. One definitely much better than the other, but I'm sorry. I just love that we live in a universe, in a world, in a society that says, you know what, we need Ewoks 1, Ewoks 2, and we can just have a story of Ewoks going ham and going nuts on people. That's the world that I want to live in personally, and that is very exciting. But Luke and I are making our way through the timeline right now, and we just did the timeline show where Lula and Zine are first meeting, and so that episode of the timeline show came out around close to the same time as this comic came out. So it was kind of nice that we were doing the beginning of that while going on right now in the publishing world is a culmination of things that have been taking place for a few years. So I really appreciated. I love how the comics are able to do some of those things that other things aren't. The Jango Fett run was a surprising run this year. I was pleasantly surprised by everything that it gave us. I will also say, I wish that the Kelnaka one-shot, Luke, I wish that this had been more of a big deal. There was just so much vitriol, and the Acolyte left such a sour taste in everyone's mouth. Not necessarily because everyone didn't like it, but because there are a lot of people that did enjoy it. And I enjoyed aspects of the Acolyte for sure. And I know you like the Acolyte.
I really enjoyed it.
But the fact that the discussion about it was so exhausting that this Kanaka one shot, I felt like I couldn't even enjoy it for what it was, because the whole time I just feel icky from this whole awful, horrible conversation going on in the interwebs.
Yeah. I will say, I even saw some people that didn't think that the Kelnaka one shot was fantastic, but I'm here to tell you, I read it and I quite enjoyed it myself.
Yes.
It maybe doesn't see Kelnaka being the hero who goes and does incredible things on page, but he's got a really cool story about how someone who was a Padawan intertwines with his story, and he's a great inspiration to everyone he touches. So I really liked it.
And then I will say the Echoes of Fear.
Whew.
Those comics,
Ooh.
like Jango Fett would have been the surprise ones from the beginning of the year, but then Echoes of Fear, the second half of the year, I think those were the ones for the High Republic lovers that are out there. probably picked that up thinking, all right, here we go. And then boom, just absolutely dropping bombs there with some of the early issues. I know, Nate, you really loved those when they first came out.
Echoes of Fear is so ridiculously good in everything that it does. Issue number 1 in particular. So issue number 1 came out around the same time as George Mann's Tears of the Nameless.
It actually came out before it.
Yeah, it came out a little bit before.
Just a little bit.
But Echoes of Fear and Tears of the Nameless coexist so beautifully, just diving into this insanely deep, ancient Star Wars lore that you have to be a fan to enjoy. You could be any type of Star Wars fan and get something out of Echoes of Fear. The first issue is all about Sith Lord who's trying to gain unlimited power. The second issue is about the Jedi dealing with that same dangerous power and what they need to do about it. And issue number 3 is this also weird mystical type of thing. Echoes of Fear is so good. It's so good. The art is immaculate. The writing is super solid all the way throughout. Yeah, I have no complaints with Echoes of Fear.
Unlimited.
That's basically what it is. And Darth Ravi the Bold is... I want more stories with that guy. He is so cool. He's so cool. But he's dead, so yeah, probably not.
But he's dead.
Battle of Jakku. Are you both enjoying the Battle of Jakku run?
I was, and then the second miniseries happened.
It's kind of what I've been hearing.
Yeah.
I'm
enjoying it.
Consensus.
I'm heading into next year. I am hoping for a good conclusion. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. So can we all agree that we can stop doing the adaptations of the Disney Plus shows? Would that be nice?
They're awful.
They
all the way
are
through.
Awful.
It is. I try to be like pretty positive when I do them because I've done a lot of them. I try to be pretty positive on them just because I try to turn it into, I'm not really reviewing this comic. It's just more of a pseudo review of the episode again and just talking about my favorite moments from that episode, really. And because if you're just doing the comic itself, you have very little to say. Like you would have very little to say at all. That's being generous, I think.
Yeah, I don't know what the strategy is with these adaptations. They're shot for shot recreations, dialogue recreations, and all that. But the artists they hire for these things can't recreate those shots. They can't recreate those moments. So it's just dull. It's lifeless. Mm-hmm. It's just poor. It's a poor reading experience because who in their right mind is picking up the comics first? Who is picking up these first instead of watching the actual series? Like, what are these comics for? They're for nobody.
Like if you're gonna do an adaptation series, it should include maybe you add on to the episodes. Like there are fun things you're putting in there that add to it, or you're giving.
They did that with
actual
the movie adaptations. They did that with the movie adaptations for The Force Awakens, for Last Jedi, or Rogue One. The Rogue One
Rise of Skywalker comes out next year.
I know, and we've seen art and stuff from that series, and you can already tell they've put in so much effort into that because it came from an age where Marvel actually gave a shit about adaptation. What the hell's going on with this new batch of them?
So like these adaptations, if we're gonna keep doing these, I hope that they take creative license to change up how they tell the story, just to make it more visually. It's what a comic should be. It's what a comic should be. Otherwise, I would just
you gotta use
grab the script. So wrapping up the show, what are we most looking forward to? We're gonna do like a 2025 like publishing show in the year, like early January. But just real quick, what are we most looking forward to in the 2025 publishing year? What is the book that we are most excited for? I'll go ahead and start. Has to be Trials of the Jedi by Charles Soule. We are wrapping up the High Republic, and I talked with Luke about this, Nate, and I'm curious if you feel similarly. It's gonna be this very bittersweet thing when it ends, because that has been the bulk of Star Wars publishing now for years. And I was a day one High Republic person. Like I pre-ordered Light of the Jedi and Into the Dark and those comics. Like I was like, this is gonna be something I dive into. And so now we're gonna be on the flip side where it's over. The High Republic's over, and I've read all the High Republic, and it's gonna be incredible. Charles Soule is, as gifted a writer as there is, especially in Star Wars. He's on, the goated list of Star Wars writers, essentially for me. But I have to say that I'm both super excited for this book. I want it yesterday, but it's going to be when I finish that book. It's going to be like when you finish watching a show on Netflix and you've binged 7 seasons of whatever, and you just kind of feel a little empty even afterwards because you don't know what to do next. I think that's going to be where I'm at. And I'm curious to see what the next big Star Wars publishing initiative is afterwards, because I'm sure they're going to have other branch off stories from whatever happens at that, or if there's other shows that they have coming out. But that for me is far and away like the number one book I'm looking forward to. Honorable mentions would be Into the Light, Claudia Gray, and we have Mask of Fear. Claudia, the year of Claudia Gray too, to start the year, which is going to be fun. But what are you guys looking forward to most right now? Because there's going to be other books that are announced soon too.
Well, I was going to say, if you weren't going to say it, The Reign of the Empire, Mask of Fear, which is by Alexander Freed.
Alexander Freed. Did I say that was by Claudia Gray?
I think you might have, but
Okay.
I knew what you meant. I can say that I'm finishing up the Alphabet Squadron trilogy by Alexander Freed, and I am very much enjoying it. I think it's incredible. I love his writing style. I think he's a really good author. I also read Battlefront Twilight Company by him. So I am really looking forward to what he's going to do with a story that's kind of centered around the start of the Empire. And with Mon Mothma, it seems like there's going to be some undercover spy work. It feels like
it's going to be good.
It feels like some kind of similar vibe to Andor, maybe. So similar vibe. I'm really looking forward to what he's going to do with that book. I even read a Rebecca Roanhorse book this year, so I think she's doing the second installment in that series. So I think it's going to be a good series.
Trilogy, right? Like a trilogy?
It is a trilogy, yes. Okay. So
do the first 2 come out next year, or is it?
I believe it's one a year.
Yeah,
I believe we have.
Yep, so we're living with this.
25, 26, 27.
Okay, I like that. We're gonna live with this for a minute. That would be my number 1 book next year if like the High Republic didn't exist, or at least wasn't ending next year. Like that would be.
Don't get it twisted. You said, I love that you said Charles the Jedi first, and I can say that is my most exciting one, but for the podcast reasons, I'm going to say a different one. I'm going to say Mask of Fear. I really want Charles of the Jedi so bad.
Next June cannot.
It's supposed to be Charles's like longest book ever. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, that's
so funny story. So last year at MegaCon, when I saw Charles Soule and we were talking, he's a good guy. Like we talked for a while. He was talking to me about like his stuff that he was doing to help with the Acolyte and some of the other Star Wars projects. And I asked him, how's Trials of the Jedi going? And he literally just grabs his laptop. He's sitting there. He has his laptop and he grabs it and he goes, "Everything you need is right here. Everything you are wanting to know is right here." And then my inner voice was telling me, grab it and run. Like, take it. And I was like, oh, I have to calm down. And then I was joking. I was like, anyway, you want to slide that over here? He said like June, don't worry, like next summer. So that was funny though, because he literally just looks at me and goes, "Yep, everything you want's right here." And he just holds up his laptop, and I'm sitting there going, "You are the man with all the answers." Nate, what are you most looking forward to next year right now?
Real before I get my answer, it's funny you mention your con experience with Charles Soule, because I had a somewhat similar one with Mark Thompson, who came to the Twin Cities Con, and Mark Thompson does all of the audiobooks. He's narrator for those books. asked him about how's the try and poke and prod for something. but unfortunately, as he wasn't even hired for the job yet. So, yeah, yes, that was unfortunate.
He said, he's like, I'm ready to get that too. I'm ready to get those details as well.
Yeah, he's just as ready as the rest. So that's funny. But to be Trials of the Jedi, man, like it's gotta be. When that book comes and goes, I'm not sure if there'll be comics kind of like the immediate void after that book comes out, but there's gonna be such a massive void that I don't know if I'm ready to hear it.
Yeah,
Quit. And I've already
you're breaking up again, Nate.
whatever.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
And we'll just say that you're just so heartbroken over Trials of the Jedi, like ending our High Republic reign. That's probably why you're emotionally not able to. It really will be. We'll talk about it more. We'll do a 2025 look on, as the year gets going, but it will be one of those moments. I think it'll be the first moment I've ever had in Star Wars reading where I sat there and wasn't sure what to move on to next after I finished something, because I've read a lot of Star Wars, different books, and they were really good, like standalones. But the only thing I can even akin it to would be when, in terms of Star Wars, was when I was a kid and I read through like the New Jedi Order, and I read all freaking 22 of those books or whatever. But the thing is, I finished that and I just moved on to, I was reading so much. I was like, oh, Percy Jackson now, let's read this or something like that. But the only thing it will match was when I read the last Harry Potter book, and I finished Harry Potter book 7 as a kid. I was in the 5th grade and I finished it, and I just sat there as a 5th grader, I don't know what to do now. Like, I don't know what to read. I don't know how to move on with my life today. I'm just going to rest in this. Or was the meme with the Wicket? I'm just going to hold space for also the Jedi in June. I'm really glad school will be over for me. I'll have my grad school summer semester going on, but that, and then whatever part-time job I'm doing as well, like, that's all I don't have to worry about lesson planning, grading, things like that. And so I'm just going to block out those like 3 days whenever that happens. Like, I am going to read all day long until this book is done.
I might use a week of PTO.
A week? You need a week? You're going to need a week? Is it for the read and the process? It's the read through, the processing, and the recovery. That's what the week is for. The entire week is for. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us for the year review part 2, talking about the publishing initiative here for Star Wars and what a year it was in 2024. I cannot wait for yet another year. I just want to say a quick thank you to Nate for keeping us organized and up to date on everything in High Republic, being willing to share the load as well when it comes to some of the reviews, because I know there's some books that can't do it all, but I know there's some books coming out that Nate would probably want to be the first one to read and review himself, but he's willing to, to share that off with everyone as well in the spirit of Star Wars and everything. So Nate, we always appreciate what you do. I've told many people Nate's probably might be the most important person on the Star Wars Newsnet team, just because of the amount of books and comics there are. He helps us on, Twitter. He's always coming up with funny stuff for us to share there. He keeps us organized. He is a gem for the team. So Nate, salute to you this year. Appreciate everything you did in 24. Luke, always happy to keep talking about all of these books on the Timeline Show. We just got done recording a Timeline Show today. It will have come out a couple of days ago at this time it comes out. Join us every Thursday for Star Wars News Net Live. We will see you later. Have a great week, everyone. Remember, for light and life, we are all